So going from left to right, we have Craig McDonald, who's a group product manager for Google. So among many things, he's tasked with mining an incredible quantity of data in support of Google's enterprise and AdWords advertising. He also has a background in AI technologies with FICO as well as HNC software, I believe. In the middle, we've got Reed Carr, who's the president and CEO of Red Door Interactive. Red Door Interactive is a marketing agency, and they have a lot of experience actually bringing complex technologies, marketing, positioning, messaging, complex technologies to end users. So I think he's got a lot to contribute here. And then we have Michael Zeller, who's the co-founder and CEO of Zementis, which is a local software startup who has predictive analytics and data mining products, and so is also in a similar space. So after I graduated from college, I went to work for an anti-terrorism defense consulting firm. That's a dirty secret my friends probably don't know about, but back in Washington, D.C. And I was sent to an AI conference. And I came back very disillusioned, right? So what you had to do, this is over 20 years ago, I must admit, you had to actually supply the system all of the answers for which that it would eventually predict or that it would eventually figure out of the data. So you had to feed up front all of the possible answers. So then in the early 2000s, I worked at a packet sniffer technology firm. And in these products, both us and our competitors had expert systems. Basically, we would look at a stream of products, and based on thresholds determined by the user, we would flag, not enough TCP acknowledgements or something like that, and it would set off an alert, right? So that was an expert system. And of course, around that same time, early 2000s, artificial intelligence was also very much equated with the Central Intelligence Agency. So my question, and perhaps Michael, you can take a stab at this first. Does the term artificial intelligence in itself have a branding problem?
I believe so, actually. Coming from a similar background, AI had different names throughout the times. I think neural networks, AI, artificial intelligence. We've moved on, I think, to data mining, now predictive analytics. Now actually it turns more towards data. Now it's big data, but it applies the same algorithms. So sometimes I think it still has that stigma of maybe it doesn't work. But I think if we look back beyond that, it's really a general technology platform, and I wouldn't worry too much about the branding here. I think it's just a branding name at this point. Everything is related to data and the solution. So if you can prove that it works, I think you can overcome that.
And what do you think, Reed, from a marketing perspective? Is there something that we can do that actually brings artificial intelligence back to what it was originally intended and that people can understand what we're talking about?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge right now is just getting to understand what people are talking about. I think it takes 15 minutes to explain. I think what we're hearing is the very definition of AI as opposed to AI's true applications. And I think the best examples that we have, unfortunately, I feel, are people saying, oh, like Siri, or, and identifying practical consumer applications of it, which is limiting. That in and of itself is limiting of what the possibilities can be. But the problem is that's where we're branching off of. So if we can start dicing that up a bit, the category of AI, then I think people start to better understand the applications of it.
And so is part of the issue here that we have to figure out exactly who our target audience is when we're creating this messaging and positioning? And so, maybe this is a question for you, Craig. Who do you think the target market is for this for platform artificial intelligence technology?
Yeah, that's a good question. You always should know who you're selling to. On the issue of the branding issue, consumers are still fascinated by AI. From movies, There's still movies that come out all the time and talk about this stuff, but it's businesses that have been burned on AI.
Well,
That's
no,
who you're selling to.
It's true. It's funny, though. I was looking at I was reading some articles online this last couple of weeks about artificial intelligence. It's a whole series of articles on it. And just it's glowing articles about the way this technology is actually being used. And in the comments, there was very little discussion about the application of technology. It was all about Skynet and the Terminator, and should we be even allowing this stuff? So do we need to convince the public, or do we need to simply bypass the public at this stage and show the benefits that the public is going to show, but without actually talking about artificial intelligence, while at the same time, as AI1 is approaching these businesses, we do have to talk about the technology? So that's a question. I mean, is that how we go to market with this sort of technology, do you think?
Well, the one thing that I was interested in, Walt, when you were giving your presentation was that I would disagree with one of your hypotheses slightly, all right, which is that when you were saying this is kind of like SAP and that you could get this consulting organizations to go out and sell it. What's a little bit different is that I'm not entirely sure you have a platform as much as a capability, right, which the capability is a little bit more narrowly focused. SAP is a platform because it has a very wide footprint in an organization. And that's the challenge, is that, corporations are the one that got burned by AI in the past because I think their biggest issue was control, right? That they were trying to incorporate AI technologies into various types of workflows, and they turned out to be black boxes. It was hard to predict what the outcomes were going to be. It was hard to understand exactly what the value proposition was going to be. But the technology you build out is going to go after that exact same market. So that's the question, is how do you take them to this next level? Mm-hmm. And if it's not an innovation and it's actually invention, redefine the term of what does an artificial intelligence-like capability bring to any sort of corporate application. Because the end consumers will be wowed by it. They're wowed by Siri. They're wowed by movies. They're wowed by the fact that their VRU works when they call up American Airlines to cancel their flight or whatever. There's a bunch of stuff in the background that consumers don't know about. They just know the magic of the experience that they have, and they either appreciate it or don't. But the corporation has to do the hard part, and that's where you're trying to sell. And they've been burned.
And so are we looking for corporations? This is, I think, kind of an interesting question, is that
I'll say more specifically developers, not corporations.
Well, that's actually important. That's an important distinction. I mean, I think one of the things we're trying to figure out here is, we've got the three-pronged approach. We've got the universities, and maybe the technology never sees the light of day, and we've got the big companies, and are we trying to teach them how to do innovation, or are they already doing this type of innovation? But there's also the end user or the developers. So we've got a couple of companies. One here in San Diego, Sweet Labs, which is essentially sold as a platform that it's APIs, it's software development kits. Twilio up in San Francisco, and so they run hackathons, and they're actually reaching out to the developer communities. Can we find, do you think, is that where that one can establish people that are actually trying to bring this technology into products that they've already envisioned?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to start getting people to play with it. I mean, and I think you can see that in academia. You give people the opportunity to play with it, but you may never see it surface. You get it in the hands of some of the softwares and give it some very basic level trial, and you start seeing a few things, see things that pop out, and at that point they can be sold through as concepts. I mean, we just need to start seeing this stuff show up in retail, or show up. Unfortunately, maybe in defense, you can't talk about what they actually do. But yeah, I mean, I think you need to start getting people to play with it, and I think you see that in the hackathons and things like that you're talking about.
So I guess I'm still wondering, though, will big companies, what is going to be the pull? How will big companies go, yeah, this is the technology that we need in order to create the next good experience for our customers or for their business customers? So would Google license this technology?
I assume that's coming to me. The answer is realistically, Google has a very NIH approach to things. They have thousands and thousands of incredibly capable, inventors and technologists there. But they do buy a lot of companies. They buy a lot of companies, and that's their MO, is that they would say, hey, with the types of things that we're selling and just the nature of the market we're in, if you're really good, we're going to buy you. We're not going to borrow you. So that's just their approach, but that's a very Google-based approach.
Right. I actually think that that's a pretty common approach. Michael, you're actually selling some of these things, though. So who do you see as the target market, and what is the response to the market?
Yeah, it's really a tough audience in the enterprise. I think for this kind of technology, you could address data mining experts, scientific analysts, to try and use it. But I think for the corporation, you have to approach them from the solution side and demonstrate credibility through a few verticals first. This is a very abstract API level package, that you can give to someone. If you're talking API, you're kind of falling in between the software engineer and the scientist. So it's going to be tough to find the user base unless you have maybe a nice user experience on top of it. But for corporations, I think credibility comes through various vertical solutions, and you have to focus on a few ones, deliver first, and demonstrate that your solution is better than the competitors, which may be the traditional data mining vendors. It may be something like a Google prediction API was actually a free product. No, I think it's not free anymore. It's now rolled out as a product. But there are various opportunities that the corporations can go to today, and kind of the traditional vendors in the data mining space. And I think you have to differentiate yourself first by showcasing certain vertical solutions where you clearly outperform them. That's what will give you the credibility. And then will people get excited about trying new things and say, oh, if it works for this, I can try it on that. But you need to start there.
Yeah, if I can add just one point to that. You had used in your presentation the adoption curve, which is the crossing the chasm curve, which people have probably seen before, where you get those early adopters. And the crossing the chasm has a way to actually do this. It's reasonably well established. Find the lighthouse customer in a couple of key verticals. If you're talking about CPG, it's Procter & Gamble. If you're talking about technology, it's HP or IBM or something like that. Probably not IBM because of their Watson investments. But you find them, you find a way to satisfy a need that they have. You serve them maniacally so that they become rabid promoters of whatever it is you're doing, and then they're the ones that carry you across the chasm. As you said, though, the challenge there is that can take an indeterminate amount of time because you don't control their ability to take your technology and innovate with it or use it within whatever they have, because it's not until they actually take your invention and make it into something that wows their end consumer that you're going to get their rabbit endorsement. So how do you promote that process? That's the big challenge.
Well, I think that's a great point. It does take a lot of time, and I think as entrepreneurs, we often think that the window is actually really short, and these things are going to happen right away. I mean, I would ask, how long did it actually take SAP to figure out that right model? And I think it was actually a pretty long time.
About 15 years.
Right, 15 years. So hopefully we're going to help you do a little quicker than that.
Okay, go home.
Can we just, Peter, can we hold that until the question period? Thanks. All right. Well, we can hold, Peter, thanks. So I guess what I'm actually hearing, and I want to see if I've got this right, is that there's a possibility of actually going directly to the enterprises with the problems without worrying about the intermediary vendors that are going to produce solutions. So actually going to the Procter & Gamble's, actually going to maybe some of the credit bureaus or any of these people that have actually huge data problems, and having enough of a solution that you're not really vertically oriented necessarily, but you have enough of a solution that internal IT departments, is that what we're talking about, is internal IT departments might be able to produce solutions and solve problems within the enterprise?
I actually have a different perspective on that a little bit, in the
Okay.
sense that I think that, we maybe think big and aim small right now and see if we can get some quick, small victories bit by bit, solve the simple problems first and get a shotgun out there a little bit. I mean, I am a firm believer in focus and that kind of stuff, but at the same token, from the way I see it in terms of how fast you need to get this thing done, I feel that there are some small victories that can be made so that people can start to see opportunities surface. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we have is we have had very little evidence. Kind of talk about the consumerization of IT. I mean, people are starting to show up at the office with an iPhone with the Siri on it, and you've seen people put this down on the table and say, why isn't our product doing X? And I think if we can find ways to get little victories as you see apps in the App Store, those sort of things, and see people playing around with small applications of it, somebody will extrapolate an opportunity that's sitting around that table at the larger firms. Once you're at that stage, you're now able to say, like that device you have right there, here's our application. In fact, you have one of those applications, you've probably used it, and it's X. And that was ours. I mean, it's very difficult if it's not been yours. You can't say, and that was our competitor's application. But I mean, if you start seeing little victories, bit by bit, I think you can have a...
So, Walt, your technology does have some victories.
Yes,
That's right?
yes.
So how have you tried to capitalize on those victories? I mean, is that where we should be targeting, like figuring out your target market is based on your existing victories and create your beachhead in Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm terminology?
Two things I wanted to answer on that. Just rewinding quickly to the very first thing we had when Michael said, you know, there are these different approaches and different names and all that. One of the challenges is that AI in the old time had to be calibrated for all the problems.
Right.
So you had a bunch of algorithms and approaches to address that and that and that problem. So if it happens that your company had 4 different verticals and you wanted to support them, you had 10 different solutions how to do that. So it was cost intensive, you had to have a lot of experts and stuff like that. Now, if you recognize our name, it says AI1. It doesn't mean artificial intelligence. It means autonomic intelligence. And that's really the key. That means there is only one approach, and it serves images or text or language at the same time. So once you're trained on it, you can solve all your problems with one approach. And that's why we call it platform, even although you write, at the end of the day, it's more a language than a platform. Because the 300 kilobyte we deliver you on that, I mean, that's not really an SDK. Usually get 2 gigabytes on a DVD, you know? So that's one thing. So we solved one of the problems where this bad taste came from because it was so complex. And then I forgot the second part.
Well, so I mean, I actually agree with you. I think there's actually there's all sorts of examples where people are going to call their system a platform, and
Yeah.
and one can argue about whether it's truly a platform or not. But if people can develop products with your technology, then you know,
Call it what you like.
Yeah, right.
Now-
Now, the second point was the victories we had and the approach we took, because we didn't want to wait the 15 years. What we did, well, we founded our own spin-offs.
Right.
So we founded a company in forensics, which is named Forensity, and they are specialized in selling the forensic solution. And then we founded a company named BrainUp, which is in the language area. And we founded a company named AI Bionics, and by having a complicated name, it could be only life science. And you have to have a complicated name in life science, so they are in life science. So those are 3 verticals we identified, and now we put our power into those 3 verticals.
So, Craig, are those his early adopters?
Sure. The question is so what have they done with the technology that's actually gone and wowed their end clients? Because that's going to be the articulation of their value proposition, which ultimately comes back to your value proposition.
Right.
So has that been documented? Is that available? to
Yes,
help
I
people
mean,
sell?
the reason why, what we did, while we identified a customer need in life science, it's the speed on next generation genomics matching. You have the biomarkers, you have 2 terabytes of data, and you have to match those snipples, you know, to the proteins and all that stuff. I'm not a doctor, so don't ask me on that. But they figured out that this approach is about 400 times faster. Now we have a slot. And so they had all the experts, you know, searching on that, and now they created a system which is solving one big problem on the timeline in next generation genome sequencing and matching and mapping and all that stuff. And so it's all documented. It has been approved by Max Planck Institute, so they did a study on it, and the Mayo Clinics and stuff like that. And then when that all was clear and the professors bought into it, Then we made a joint venture with an expert group, which are expert in the market. So they own the market already. So as a for us practical approach, we purged ourselves into the market leaders, and together with them now we try to launch that into a specific market. And the same we did on the forensic. So we addressed those police departments which were most advanced. They confirmed that, yeah, this is an approach we need. Then we had some police experts coming in and say, we form a company around that, we license them, and so they went into that market segment, and so they have the reputation, they have the first little success stories, and that's how they go into the market right now.
So, you know, I can see that you would have a dilemma if you went to the competitors of those spin-offs and said, here's some technology that we can provide you to compete. But I guess the other approach might be that you find other verticals like that and you go to those leading industries and you try to do the same thing. And I'm guessing this is where you're running into the not in my house.
Yeah, that's exactly. So we try to have a reference with our own companies. Now the good news, okay, they will make some revenue soon. The bad news, since there are our own companies or we are heavy involved, it's not an independent reference. So you don't solve it 100%. You get a little bit closer, but there's still some gaps there. So you still have to come over that bridge and gap and talk to this bigger. And maybe the approach is not to go to the biggest first, go to the ones which want to be bigger. So take the ones which are challenging the bigger ones and they like to be a little bit advanced and maybe have shorter distance for decision making inside. And so maybe you focus on those.
So if people are familiar with Clayton Christensen's Innovator's Dilemma, back in the early 90s, he discussed, you know, big companies, successful companies are very good at sustaining innovation. And so they can, using technology, and often, you know, again, very innovative technology, they can improve the performance of their products, they can come out with a new version of their products that lowers prices, but it's generally towards their existing market, and that's sustaining innovation. And where companies have a very difficult time is with disruptive innovation. Because you have new companies that come in and they have got radically new technology and they're creating a brand new market. And so the big companies actually, the margins are lower, it's selling to non-existent customers, and these big companies make very rational business decisions that, no, we don't want to invest in this new technology because it's not our core value prop and it's to new customers and the margins are lower, et cetera, et cetera. And over time, in several cases, in many cases, these new startups start eating away at the core technology of the successful businesses. So you have this radical new innovative invention. And the question is, in my mind, whether your customer is supposed to be somebody that's doing sustaining innovation versus somebody that's doing disruptive innovation, and whether this technology is the right equation for either one of those. So, Craig, you're nodding. What do you think? Or no, I'm sorry, Michael.
That's okay. I think that's exactly the distinction here. Sometimes you get responses at large corporations when you present your product, and you know, assuming it's a great product, it does things in a different way. And the response can be, wow, this looks too good to be true. And I think those are the guys who are more on the risk side who say, well, you know, it looks too good to be true. I don't want to touch it now. Versus the other ones that are blown away by it and that they go out of their way and actually try it. So I guess my question for AI1 would be, is it really the not invented here syndrome, or is it, you know, maybe too good to be true as the main response? Is that what you see from your target customers?
It depends a little bit in which verticals. And sometimes it's more than not invented, and sometimes it's more too good to be true. Especially if you tackle a problem which is staying there for a long time, and all of a sudden you walk in and say, now we solved it. Mm-hmm. Then the first reaction is no, we don't believe. I had people, they said, we seen it, we touched it, we used it, we tried it, it works, we don't believe it.
Yeah.
So,
that would be a classic non-early adopter there,
yes.
right? Yeah.
And so you just keep your nerves and you try another one, you know. I mean, that's all you can do.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the target market to identify maybe the Googles of the world that are innovative enough to recognize the greatness of a new invention versus, I think, your traditional large company, maybe a financial institution that's ready to use a stable product that improves their performance by 15%. But they're not looking at leapfrogging the competition, because that would be considered maybe too risky.
Right, good point.
I have an example on that. I talked to a guy from Autonomy. I mean, they have been a long time around, and they did a brilliant job, and they were, in the first time, and they're still around. I mean, many disappeared, or maybe purged or whatever. However, Autonomy had a similar approach than we had. They said, well, we have something which can serve many. And so they also started in having this full-featured platform or solution, and they tried to sell it to the customers. It turns out that they start to be much more successful when they cut it down into little products, although they all came out the same box, but they named it and did it different. So, oh yeah, we have a solution for email classifying and distribution. Oh yeah, we have another solution for helping on call center stuff and so on. And because they said, no, we can't do everything out of the same box, but we have a solution here and here and here, people start believing that this is possible. If you come in and say, we have one serve all, they don't believe. And I think today, they sell multiple small solutions into small, bigger, and large corporations, and they all pick what they need out of it. And that comes back a little bit to the SAP story. I mean, if you take SAP, you have a 1,000% of possibilities, but you only need about 80%. And so the trick is to find fast the right 80%, and then you're happy with. And there you need these connectors which help you probably. Either you have the experts by yourself and you can choose, or then you have these consulting groups and they lead you as a customer to the solution and help you to find out which one of the 2% you maybe only need. Because if you just like to improve a process step, it's maybe only one function you need, which saves you, 50% of the costs at that point. But you need somebody to guide you there, because I can't be the expert for all the verticals we can go into. And that's really the problem we have. Intelligence means you need to have a solution which is easy to hand over and to explain. But on the other side, then you need a domain expertise where the problem is.
Right, but what's funny is about almost all the startup entrepreneurs that I work with, the first thing I ask them when their target market is, they say, oh, it's everybody, sure. Right? I mean, especially because if you want to raise money, you think that you have to show your market is very big, and it's like, no, who actually is going to use your technology? Oh, everybody, right? So,
of course.
Reed, it sounds like to me a segmentation exercise.
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about with respect to small wins. I mean, the challenge right now is, for example, to explain some of those victories. I don't get it. I mean, I don't know what those victories were. But if we're able to talk about the Caterpillar example, you're able to talk about, which wasn't solving a very particular problem, but the footprint thing. That was a great story in terms of, and now I could say, well, geez, I see how that works in retail. Foot traffic, where are people going? What are they about to buy when they walk in a location? And what the creativity that can bring if you see these small applications. I now know who the killer is because I know what shoe they were wearing. Done, and stop telling the story. This is the thing, and we're going to solve this one small product or a problem. And I think at the end of the day, we do have a big branding and communication problem here, which is just clarifying the little victories that we can have day in and day out, because that's more or less just giving it a little bit of gas and get in, and then we can start pushing the throttle and go, well, geez, I mean, knowing where people are going in the store, but I mean, imagine you could do this, imagine you could do that, but let them tease it out, because I mean, when you're trying to get those big enterprise sales and all that stuff, and that not invented here, it's a percentage game. If it's 2% right, left, and not solving 100% of their problem, they're like, well, it solves 98% of it, but it's not exactly it, and so we're going to cut it off. But if you solve the simple problem that you can hit on the nose at 100%, we can move, and we can move quickly.
Yeah, can I make one point? I think the autonomy analogy is really super spot on, but I want to make 2 points about it. One, autonomy did something really specific, which is they had a similar capability. Unfortunately, I was a product manager of one of those companies that was competing with them about 10 years ago, and we got crushed by autonomy, unfortunately. And it had to do for a very simple reason. We didn't have the right sales force and distribution model to compete with them, and they were very focused on this market. They had a raw capability that did what was then AI and very advanced AI, but they realized that selling that capability was very difficult because you can't go to a corporation and say, hey, who here wants to buy some AI today? Because nobody was asking that, right? They didn't know that. But what they did know is they knew, well, my email response process is really super poor, and my call center response process is really inefficient, et cetera. So they moved one step up the stack, and they said, well, we'll put this capability with a minimal wrapper around it to sell to specific business problems shared by everybody. Now, that gets you one other thing, which is now you can go to, I hate to break this down into mundane Salesforce tactics, but now I have salespeople that I can tell, go find this person responsible for that thing, because there's nobody in the company who's responsible for, AI. Go find that person that's responsible for the call center function, for the response function, for selling and making the selling process more effective. And I guess I had a third point, which is somebody brought up before, should we go to IT? I worked at HP before. You do not want to sell to IT, so if you smartly went and sold to something that was not IT.
But actually, let's dive into that for just a second, because I think that the point really is that if you identify the problem inside the enterprise, and as a consultative salesperson, which is what we're really talking about, right? You're going into the organization and you're trying to figure out what the problems the organization is having, and then you as the salesperson is identifying which one of those problems that your solution actually can help solve. But if you're selling an API, then somebody actually has to develop the product. So my question is that at least in the large enterprises, does the IT think that that's going to be their domain to solve those problems? Or does AI1 still need to then be establishing these relationships with vendors that are going to provide that solution?
I think you have to go to the vendors, because IT in a large corporation is overwhelmed with day-to-day tasks and not really in the business of inventing or new applications. They may develop a certain baseline functionality, but it's really within very small requirements, not necessarily a technology that's complex like AI1's. Anything related to and we face something similar, actually. We have a platform technology that's deployment of predictive analytic models. So essentially, you could deploy an AI type of an algorithm. If you go to IT, they say, well, until someone comes and says, here's an AI type algorithm, go deploy it, it doesn't, they're not come as a potential customer to us. They don't ask that question. So I think you need to go to the guys who are trying to solve that particular business problem. That can be the business side, that can be an R&D environment, that can be analytic scientists that are more familiar with kind of an AI type of technology. Or it could
And
be
these are not necessarily then big software players, right? This is not necessarily SAP, it's SAP itself, right? Or Salesforce that's solving particular problems, or vendors that are solving data analytics problems. I mean, are you going to ISVs? Are you going to other independent software vendors? Or are you going to consultants that are actually already working with the company, or both?
Potentially both, but I think in that market, it's going to be very fragmented, because
Right.
there's no big player that says, I'm the implementer of all AI technology. So you have to find business-specific solutions that go and say, okay, this is my email spam problem, solve it for this. So that's the difficult part of being a very specific solution. But I think that is the approach you have to take. Looking at IBM and Watson, for example, they started with one very easy to understand example, game shows. The technology behind it's probably amazing. There's lots of things going on, and now they're starting to apply it to healthcare. But they started out with one example. Now they have a second example.
Right.
And that company certainly has more marketing dollars to spend than we have here, probably. So
I think that's getting at what Reed was talking about in terms of the
Yeah.
solutions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think in terms of being able to sell those simple solutions, I mean, at the end of the day, too, I mean, 80% of the time you're still selling a finance. I mean, you got to explain, how this is going to save money or make them more money. So if you can explain that succinctly, then that finds its way up the ladder and gets approved. And another thing to add there too is I know that a lot of what we're talking, it's like, well, the technology can do so much more, and it takes a lot of discipline to say, but it's only going to do this little bit right now.
Right.
And there are some tricks you can do in the sense that you can still sell the same product in 2 levels of that product or something like that. Even though it's the same product, you could say this is the basic level and it does these basic functions, and then have the kind of Lamborghini in the garage, behind the curtain, whatever it might be. Just to preserve the integrity of the meat of that system. There's a way to stratify it in that way too.
So in the lean startup world, we like to talk about startups as being entities that should be designed around learning rather than designed around executing, because you have to actually learn what you're going to execute on before you execute on it. And so it kind of sounds like to me that maybe AI1 is still in this learning process. So tell me what you think about the strategy of actually outsourcing, I think, some of that learning to consultants. I mean, if you are the one that yourself is going into these enterprises and learning about the problems that they're trying to solve, should we not be handing that over to consultants that you hope are bringing you the business through the vendors?
It's just different learning. I mean, learning it through the consultants, that kind of stuff. I mean, the channels are different. You have different requirements. You have different ways of managing those. Each have their own complexities and probably cost about the same to manage. But yeah, learning what you're trying to do and building that dialogue.
Right, but what do you think the right conduit is, though? I mean, I think that, I think Europe actually functions a little bit different in the U.S. I think in Europe, you often have the systems integrators that own the relationships already with these big businesses, where I think lots of times in the corporations, it's more expected that it's going to be the vendor with direct communication, and that's actually how you learn the ins and outs of the business and what problems there are to be solved.
Yeah, that's a tough question. I mean, my initial reaction is almost an NIH reaction from a selling standpoint. I would be very loath, since this is such a critical thing, I'd be very loath to outsource that because it's something that the organization has to learn, and it has to be part of the core competency of the organization. I need to understand the value proposition of my technology. I need to understand who I'm selling to, and giving that off to a third party. I understand that part of this is I'm trying to expand my network as quickly as possible, but I'm probably a bit cynical saying, hey, going to a series of consultants that have a whole series of other objectives that they're trying to do and trying to slot mine in there, that's going to be a very hard thing to do because I'm not going to have all of their time, and my incentives aren't going to be perfectly aligned. And this is something that I have to go through. This is why I raise money. I raise money not just to build the asset, but to learn how to sell and monetize the asset, and that has to be figured into the upfront capital raising equation. That's the adoption curve. We talked about it before in the crossing the chasm process. Part of that is sales and marketing expertise development.
Yeah, I don't think there's a single right answer in that one. I mean, there's a lot of wrong ones, but certainly.
No,
but no single right. And the only reason I say is if that's that's your challenge is learning it, then you just have to be disciplined about learning and find alternative ways of doing it and make sure that you know how critical it is. But I mean, anything can be overcome.
Sure. I guess, having run channel programs before, is if your channel actually isn't succeeding, then they're not going to stick around long enough to teach you, I don't think. Right. So, Michael, did you have comments on that?
I think the consultant approach can probably work with some of the vertical solutions that are in place that have shown traction, that have shown customer success. Then you can start slowly bringing in consultants. But I think system integrators are going to be a tough job because I don't think they have the right expertise here. You'd have to go to very, very specialized consultants that know AI technology, the benefits, where it applies, where it doesn't apply. So it's not a trivial selection process. So I would focus on the early wins, try to establish a few more beachheads. And with those beachheads, then you can try and hand off to other ones, but I think it's a second step.
And so the beachheads are really where you're establishing domain expertise within a particular vertical of people that are they have the same pain, right? They're sharing those experiences, and by diving in deep, you're figuring out where you can then sort of automate your sales. You go back to that vertical time and time again.
Yeah, I mean, from my personal experience, it was exactly selling a platform technology that's applicable across all industries. But you go to a financial institution, they say, well, what have you done in the financial world before? So it's references, it is very specific applications in that domain. Even if you have the greatest technology, you won't have enough credibility to establish a beachhead otherwise.
So I know that AI1 is developing what's called minimum viable products, which is a buzzword near and dear to my heart. Basically, it's a minimum number of features that produces enough value that your customers will be interested in paying for your product. So, Walt, maybe you can talk a little about what is the strategy with your MVPs? Is that in order to demonstrate some expertise in verticals?
Yeah, I mean, the point is, if you're talking to an end user, he likes to see something. So you kind of have to demonstrate, he addresses you a problem, and then you show them that the technology would be capable of solving that. And one way to do that is having those MVPs where you can show functions, where you nail it down to one function and you show that, okay, you have this problem here, okay, that's how it could be solved. On the other side, if you're talking to vendors, they usually like to know how you do it. The customer doesn't care how you name it and how you do it. He just needs to have that sorted. And if you can show that you can sort that, fine. Now somebody should do him the program. And so we really have a total different communication to possible end users and the vendors. The vendors, first you have to kind of get your reputation that you know what you're doing, and they will be better than others, and they have an advantage to the competitors, and therefore they're scared. Do you have any third-party code inside? So I mean, there are total different issues. They're not even customers. Do we do that because of customers? Well, no, we talk about the technology. So that's a different issue, and therefore it really depends. If you, and that's maybe a good news on our side, we have a very large network because we're not young startups people. So we have some experience, and everybody of us brings in some of his network. So it's easier for us to get contact to those possible markets. If you're a young startup and you have youngsters running the startup, you don't have all that. So that's even a bigger challenge because you do have to establish all that first.
Right, but even these existing networks, in the end, are they going to sign a check for technology without the user demand? I mean, that's the big question, right?
No.
So you're creating the demand on one side, and then you have a whole other sell on the other side.
Yeah, the domain. Otherwise, they would never sign up.
Right.
Why should they change what they do?
Right.
Why should their car use only 2 liters if everybody buys it, even if it uses 10 liters? There's no pressure there. So that's exactly what happens. And there's also a time. I always say every time decade has a certain amount of innovation she can eat up. And if that's used, we just feed up with all this new stuff. And we have to take a brief and to use that new stuff. And then the next step can happen. So it could happen that you have the best idea, but all the credit for innovation is used at the moment. So you have to wait, even if it's better than what they are using now and what they thought that's a better innovation right now. So there are many issues to that, also on this kind of soft facts which can happen. Right. Or the company made a big reorganization change and stuff like that. So they don't have time for any other movements. And it depends a little bit how you come in at the time slot when you're ready. And that could be a problem for you, or you could even be an advantage for you.
Right. So there's all sorts of variables, a lot of them outside of your control.
Yes.
The most successful driving force is when you actually have customers that are demanding from them that technology be incorporated, or at least that the benefits of that technology are achieved by
I give you an example. We are in a big business house, and one company is named Swissport is in the same building. So one time, 3 o'clock in the morning, I was still in the office, and somebody was banging on the door. And so I was open up our front door, and there was a guy standing there saying, "Oh, good grief, there's somebody here." And I said, "Who the hell are you?" He said, "Oh, I'm the CEO of Swissport." who the hell are you? I'm saying, oh, I'm CEO of this little company here. And he said, okay, can you give me, I'm in a business discussion with the United States, and I have to prove my identity. Can you prove my identity? Here's my passport. At 3 o'clock in the morning, come on, I mean, you know. So I said, yeah, okay. So we went down his conference room, and I was confirming that this guy has a passport which is saying that he is that guy. And so he could sign these contracts. And then after that, he took a big cigar and he said, let's have a cigar and a whiskey. I said, okay. And then he said, what the hell are you doing up there? And I said, well, we do software. And he said, oh, we have a problem. Can you do matching the blacklists of the TSA? And I said, yeah, I think so. What are the blacklists? And he said, those are the lists of the people should not fly because they are, under monitoring of the police and the anti-crime and all that stuff. And I said, oh, that's nice. Yeah, I think we can do that. So he said, okay, 3 o'clock. Can we meet again 8 o'clock in the morning? I said, no problem. So 8 o'clock in the morning we meet again, and he brought in all his stuff. And he said, here's the guy, he's solving our problem. And I said, well, okay, maybe you introduce your problem first, then I know whether we're going to solve it. And he said, well, I just tell you that. We have an offer of our standard vendor, and he want to have 2 million on that. And he takes half a year to do it. Can you do it less money and faster? I said, yes. I mean, what should I say? I mean, come on. And so 1 month later, we had it done.
Well, so you've discovered the secret sauce for a successful startup.
Yeah.
Serendipity.
Yeah. Being up late. So they used it for a couple of years, and now at Zurich Airport, at JFK, and other airports. And it was only one little piece. I mean, it was about 1% what we could do. We just sold there. And they had a little piece of software on a little laptop, and all they did, by email, they got the information in who should not fly, and they were matching those names. And the magic was that you had to match those names in a certain way. You shouldn't find too many, but you only should find the ones which are really the bad guys.
Right. Well, so I mean, it really requires domain expertise inside of all of these verticals.
It does.
In order to discover these nuggets of need.
Right.
That are not going to be necessarily unearthed by ever even using the term artificial intelligence or even autonomic intelligence, right?
Yes.
So this is the
Yeah.
this is the core dilemma, and I think that from what I'm hearing from the panel is that market segmentation is key, and learning from your different markets and consultative sales approach, and really at the beginning it does feel like a shotgun approach until you can figure out.
You're absolutely right. That's what we
Right.
did. We
So-
shot and we see who moves. Okay, that's our customer.
Right. And then you double down on that, right?
Yes.
And then you double down on that. So I'm curious, any final thoughts from our panel?
Yeah, I'll make one point. It's a really interesting and tricky marketing problem because you have kind of like 3-level marketing problem. You have to sell what it is, because the reality of what it is a SDK for an artificial intelligence capability platform. You have to sell what it will do for the client almost in its immediacy, which is a very domain-specific thing like you were just talking about, because you're going to have to hook that capability to some short-term problem that a client has. Then you have to almost sell what it could be long-term, which is the big grand vision. And it's the old saying, you sell the vision, you install the product, but you're going to have those 3 stories ready to go for any type of client that you come out with, and you're going to give what you get on that particular problem, because those last 2 do require domain expertise, and you'll just never find a sales force that, unless there's a lot of you out there, Walt, many of yous walking around, you're just not going to find a sales force that you'd be able to train up and be able to solve all of those type of problems. You want to point them at very specific things, and that's just a market research problem. Find the most lucrative ones, the ones that have the widest market, where you can create the biggest short-term gain based off the capabilities of the technology, and then rock and roll.
Yeah, I mean, I think early adopters, they buy technology. They buy something called AI. I think the business users, they buy solutions. They're looking to solve simple problems most often, and those simple problems have to lead to some manner of selling more or saving money somehow. So the more we can simplify these stories, simplify the applications, call things what they are to the business user, I think we'll have a lot more success and see these things through. And then, you know, give them the 1% and find your way up to the 100.
Yeah, and probably I'd like to add, maybe find some friends in the market. So products that do something similar but not what you do. So you can kind of say, well, you're already using this kind of product and this is the next step. Kind of position yourself as more of a add-on to some existing solutions. That could be an interesting opportunity. So you're not like this one piece that's out there, you know, way above everybody else, but it's easier to relate to if there's another solution like a data mining product that's close enough that you can partner with. But I think now is the time for this type of solution. I mean, we've seen this whole big data movement. Data is cheap, it's easy to store, it's everywhere. Statistical analysis is an absolute must. So this type of technology, we're just seeing the beginning of it. Data mining and predictive analytics has seen this surge of interest, given, of course, that IBM is promoting it heavily. But now is the time for such a technology. So I think timing is perfect. It's just a matter of finding the quick customer wins.
Cool, thanks, guys. Now